No one in the courtroom expected what happened next. It began with a gasp, then a stumble. Then the young man in the defendant's seat clutched his chest as though the air itself had suddenly turned to stone. Whispers rippled through the room. A bailiff leaned forward. Someone in the back stood up. And Judge Frank Caprio, seasoned, calm, and steady as a lighthouse in a storm, lifted his reading glasses just an inch when the young man let out a trembling, broken sound. But it wasn't the panic attack that shocked the courtroom. It was what came after. Because this case, this boy, and the truth that would unravel over the next hour would test the very meaning of justice, compassion, and the invisible wounds people carry. And when Judge Caprio finally spoke his verdict, the room went silent, stunned into breathless stillness. The defendant's name was Evan Morelli, a 19-year-old with dark circles under his eyes and shoulders that seemed too heavy for his age. He had been charged with reckless driving, specifically running a red light at high speed before being pulled over. According to the officer, Evan's hands were shaking so badly during the stop that it appeared he was either intoxicated or in some kind of medical crisis. Yet, tests showed no substances, no alcohol, no drugs, nothing. The courtroom felt unusually tense today, as though everyone sensed something beneath the surface. The wooden benches creaked with the shifting weight of people leaning forward, watching Evan with curiosity and suspicion. Some murmured that he looked guilty. Others whispered that he looked terrified. But no one could quite place it. Something was off. Something unspoken. Something heavy. Evan avoided every eye in the room. His fingers tapped nervously against his leg. And every few minutes, he took a breath that sounded like he was steadying himself for something he wasn't ready to face. His record was clean. His appearance was quiet. But his energy tangled, jittering, unsettled, pulled every attention in the room. And when Judge Caprio glanced down at the file and saw the last name Morelli, his brows lifted ever so slightly. "Morelli," he murmured under his breath. "Where have I heard that name?" Judge Frank Caprio leaned back in his chair, as though giving his instincts space to listen before his mouth spoke. Decades on the bench had taught him two things. The law is precise, but people are complicated, and every case carries a story beneath the surface. He studied Evan, noticed how the boy sat too straight, like someone raised in a strict household. How his fingers twitched against his knee, how his eyes flicked toward the exit every few seconds, as though calculating the distance. Panic or guilt. Caprio never guessed too quickly. With a slow breath, he looked back at the file and remembered. Morelli. Yes, a familiar name. A respected one. Then it clicked. Evan Morelli was the son of Detective Robert Morelli, a man Caprio had known for years, a hard-working, well-respected officer who had testified in his courtroom many times. Polite, sharp, always firm but fair. Caprio's chest tightened with quiet surprise. So this is his boy. He set the file down gently, already sensing the delicate line he would have to walk between impartial justice and the human truth that would soon reveal itself. But before Caprio could speak, Evan cleared his throat. I'm sorry," the boy whispered, voice thin and cracking. I wasn't feeling well that day." His lawyer placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, but Evan didn't look at her. He stared at the floor, shame blooming across his expression. Caprio could feel the room shift. A few raised eyebrows. A sigh. Someone in the back muttered, "Kids always have an excuse." Caprio ignored the noise. "Mr. Morelli," he said gently, "I want you to take your time. We're in no rush here." For a moment, Evan didn't speak. He just breathed shaky, uneven breaths, like someone standing on a cliff edge. His jaw tensed, then relaxed, then tensed again. Finally, "It wasn't a real panic attack," he whispered. The words fell like a pin dropping in a silent hall. People turned to each other, whispering, confused. Caprio didn't move a muscle. Evan swallowed hard. "I faked it." A gasp from someone, a scoff from another. His lawyer closed her eyes. Evan continued, "I know it was wrong. I didn't know what else to do." Caprio watched him carefully. The boy looked like he was tearing himself open piece by piece, offering the truth with trembling hands. "Why?" Caprio asked softly. "Why pretend to have a panic attack?" And that was when the story began to unravel. Evan's voice grew quieter. "Because my father, he doesn't believe in panic attacks, or anxiety, or anything like that." His throat tightened. "He says they're signs of weakness." There it was. A small ripple, a glimpse of the iceberg under the water. Evan lifted his eyes for the first time, revealing fear and exhaustion tangled like knots. "He thinks I'm supposed to be like him. Strong, confident, unshakable." Evan's breath hitched. "But I'm not. I've never been." Caprio felt a heavy ache settle in his chest. Caprio folded his hands, his tone soft. "Evan, let's go back to the day of the incident. Tell me what happened." Evan nodded shakily. "I was driving home from my shift," he said. "I work at a warehouse in Cranston. It was late. I hadn't slept much the night before." "Why not?" Caprio asked. Evan hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. "My father and I had a disagreement." Caprio's expression remained neutral, patient. "What was the disagreement about?" Evan looked down, voice shrinking. "He got a call from my supervisor. Said I'd had another anxiety episode at work." His voice trembled. "My father doesn't like hearing things like that. He thinks I'm embarrassing the family." Someone in the back row murmured again, but this time it was softer, more sympathetic. Caprio's tone remained even, but his eyes softened. "So the next day, when the officer pulled you over," Evan nodded, cutting him off gently. "I panicked. Not about the ticket. About him. About my dad finding out. I knew he'd hear about the stop." He swallowed hard. "So I faked the panic attack, hoping the officer would think I just needed medical help and let me off with a warning." He wiped his eyes quickly. "I know it was wrong. I wasn't trying to get out of trouble. I was trying to get out of being yelled at. Or worse." A silence fell over the room, thick, weighted, human. Caprio leaned back slightly. "This boy isn't a criminal," he thought. "He's drowning in something he doesn't know how to name." And the bigger truth was still coming. Caprio's voice remained steady. "Evan, is there more you want to tell me? You mentioned your father reacts strongly to your anxiety. Has something happened recently?" Evan closed his eyes, and the dam broke. "My dad hasn't been the same since last year," he whispered. "After the shooting, the courtroom froze." Caprio felt the air shift. "Go on," he said, voice low, understanding already flickering in his eyes. Evan nodded, tears forming. "There was a case. A bad one. My dad shot a suspect during a chase. It was ruled justified. But he never came back from it. Not really. He changed." Evan looked up, eyes glistening. "And ever since then, he expects me to be tough enough. But he can barely handle himself." He swallowed. "He has nightmares every night. And anger in the mornings. And he says that I'm supposed to be stronger, so he doesn't have to worry about me." A tear slid down Evan's cheek. "And I'm trying, Your Honor. I really am. But I'm not him. And I can't pretend anymore." For a long moment, no one spoke. Not the spectators. Not the lawyers. Not even Judge Caprio. It was as if the entire courtroom was holding its breath, suspended between the weight of what Evan had revealed and the fear of what was still unsaid. Evan wiped his face with the back of his hand, embarrassed by the tears, but too overwhelmed to stop them. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, glancing from Evan to Judge Caprio, clearly unsure whether this case was spiraling into something far beyond the realm of traffic violations. Even the bailiff, usually as still as a statue, seemed to soften. Judge Caprio finally broke the silence. "Evan," he said quietly, "I'm very sorry for what your father has gone through. Trauma does not leave a household untouched." His voice was gentle, but there was a firmness beneath it, a judicial strength that said, "Truth matters here. Your story matters here." Evan nodded, eyes down. "But," Caprio continued, You still haven't told me why you ran that red light. Fear of your father is one thing, but something else was happening that night, wasn't it? Evan's lips parted, but he hesitated. His lawyer leaned in. It's okay. You're safe here. But Evan didn't look at her. He looked at Judge Caprio, searching his expression, testing the air, as though deciding whether he could trust the weight of his secret to this courtroom. And then, he spoke. I was following him. The room stiffened. Judge Caprio narrowed his eyes slightly. Following who, Evan? Evan drew a shaky breath. My dad. A collective murmur rippled across the benches, sharp, confused, electric. Caprio kept perfectly still. Explain, he said. Evan's voice trembled, but there was something else in it too. Something like guilt or fear. The night I ran the red light, my dad was supposed to be at home. He'd told us he was off duty. But when I passed the precinct on my way home from work, I saw his car pulling out. Evan shook his head. He didn't see me, so I followed him. His hands gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles whitened. I had this feeling, he whispered. I can't explain it. My mom's been worried. I've been worried. He's been getting worse, less stable, more angry, more withdrawn. Caprio listened with a stillness that came from decades of hearing the pain beneath people's words. So, I followed him, Evan continued. I know I shouldn't have. I know it sounds stupid, but I was scared, and I didn't want him doing something reckless. I wanted to make sure he was okay. He looked down, ashamed. And that's when he sped through the intersection. I went after him without thinking, and that's when I ran the red light. A stunned silence blanketed the courtroom. Judge Caprio's face remained composed, but his eyes revealed something shifting, a realization forming. The prosecutor cleared his throat. Your Honor, this is... Caprio raised one calm hand. Let him finish. Evan continued, voice hollow. I kept following him until he pulled off by the docks. He sat in the car alone for a long time. I didn't know if he was thinking about doing something to himself. His voice cracked. Then he drove off again. I followed him a little longer. But I guess the officer caught me running the red light on the way. He let out a trembling exhale. I wasn't running from the law. I was running after my father. The courtroom felt heavier than any storm. No one whispered now. No one leaned back. Not a bench creaked. This was no longer a trivial traffic case. This was a family unraveling. A boy trying to hold together the pieces of a father broken by trauma. A quiet desperation that had led him straight into this courtroom. Caprio breathed in slowly, letting the truth settle. In his mind, Judge Caprio could see it clear as day. A young man chasing after the flickering tail lights of someone he loved. A son carrying a burden too heavy for his 19-year-old shoulders. A household where pain traveled from person to person like a shadow no one wanted to name. Caprio had seen many cases, many tragedies, many families crumbling under pressure, but this touched something deeper. Children often pay for wounds they didn't cause, and sometimes, the smallest mistakes hold the largest stories. He glanced down at the ticket again. A simple red light violation. A charge that carried a fine. Nothing more. But behind it was a child's fear, a man's trauma, a family's unraveling. Caprio's heart ached with the weight of that truth. He thought of the countless police officers who carried invisible scars from the job. He thought of the families who stood by them, absorbing the tremors of those unseen earthquakes. And he thought of the boy in front of him trying to be a lifeline, when he himself was barely staying afloat. Caprio exhaled softly and leaned forward. Evan, he said gently, does your father know you were following him that night? Evan shook his head quickly. No, please don't contact him about this. He'll be furious. Caprio nodded slowly. I understand. Evan swallowed. I wasn't trying to interfere. I was just scared of what might happen if I didn't keep an eye on him. Caprio tapped his pen lightly, a familiar gesture when his mind was deep in thought. Has your father ever harmed himself? He asked softly. Evan's eyes filled again. No, he whispered, but he talks like he might one day. A quiet, heartbreaking confession. Whispers flickered around the room, more sympathetic now, touched with a new understanding. Caprio's voice softened even further. "And have you talked to anyone about this? A counselor? A teacher? A friend? Anyone?" Evan shook his head. "I can't," he said. "If people at the precinct found out, if people knew he wasn't okay, it would destroy him. So it's just me and my mom, and she's exhausted." A tear slid down his face. "And I'm trying to help, but I don't know how. I'm not strong enough alone." The boy crumpled slightly, just enough for Caprio to see the fragile truth behind his posture. He wasn't weak. He was overwhelmed. A child, holding back a tidal wave with bare hands. Judge Caprio leaned forward, elbows resting gently on the bench. "Evan," he said quietly, "look at me." The boy hesitated, then lifted his eyes. Caprio held his gaze with quiet strength. "You are not responsible for your father's healing. You are not responsible for carrying the weight of his trauma. And you are certainly not weak." Evan's lip trembled. "You are a young man doing the best you can in a situation no young man should ever have to face." His voice echoed with empathy so profound the entire courtroom felt it. "And the fact that you followed your father out of worry for his safety," Caprio continued, "does not make you weak. It makes you human. It makes you compassionate. It makes you brave." A tear fell from Evan's chin onto his shirt. Caprio paused, letting the words seep into him. But his tone turned firm. "You also made a dangerous choice. Running a red light, especially at high speed, could have put lives at risk, including your own." Evan nodded immediately, remorse flooding his expression. "I know, Your Honor. I know. I wasn't thinking. I was scared." Caprio's eyes softened again. "I believe you." Another pause. "But the law is the law. And I must weigh your actions against the story you've shared." Evan's breath hitched. This was the moment. The moment before judgment. The moment the entire room leaned into, waiting, hoping. Judge Caprio leaned back in his seat again, eyes drifting up for just a moment, as though consulting something beyond the courtroom. Not the law books. Not the fines chart. Something deeper. Something older. Wisdom. Experience. Humanity. He folded his hands. "Let me ask you one more thing, Evan," Caprio said gently. "Why did you fake the panic attack? Why not just tell the officer the truth, that you were worried about your father?" The question struck deeper than expected. Evan's voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to ruin his reputation," he whispered. "I didn't want anyone thinking he's unstable. He's a good man, Your Honor. He's just hurting." Another truth. Another wound. Another reason this case was unlike any Caprio had seen in a long time. The courtroom had become so quiet that even the hum of the overhead lights seemed loud. Evan sat there, shoulders trembling, eyes red and swollen from emotion he had tried so long to hide. The truth hung over the room like a fragile glass ornament. One wrong move, one harsh judgment, and the boy would shatter. Judge Caprio looked at him with an expression so gentle, so deeply human, that several people in the courtroom quietly wiped tears from their own eyes. Caprio closed the file slowly, deliberately, signaling that he no longer needed it. The truth, the real truth, was now in the room, breathing with them. In the quiet chamber of his mind, Caprio weighed the pieces. A red light violation, a frightened young man, a father drowning in trauma, a household teetering on emotional collapse, and a boy trying with everything he had to keep it from falling apart. He recalled the many police officers who had stood in his courtroom over the years, brave men and women who had sacrificed parts of themselves to serve others. Behind every uniform was a human being, fragile, complex, sometimes wounded. But behind those wounded officers were families, children, spouses, silently enduring the tremors. This is the hidden cost, he thought. The cost no one talks about. The cost the law books don't include. He sighed softly. The law demanded structure. Justice demanded fairness. But humanity demanded heart. And this case required all three. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his voice warm and steady. "Evan," he began, Before I deliver my decision, I want to say something to you. Something I hope you carry beyond this courtroom." The boy wiped his cheeks and nodded, bracing himself. "You have been living under a pressure no young man should bear," Caprio said. "But I want to be very clear. Your father's trauma is not your burden to fix. It is a wound that requires care, not secrecy." Evan swallowed hard. "And you," Caprio continued, "deserve support just as much as he does." The courtroom listened, as though each word was stitched from compassion itself. "You showed courage by following him that night. You showed love. But you also made a dangerous choice. Running a red light could have harmed you or someone else. You understand that?" "Yes, Your Honor," Evan whispered. "I'm truly sorry. I won't make that mistake again." Caprio nodded. "I believe you." He took a deep breath and leaned back, not out of distance, but to gather the threads of wisdom he needed for what came next. "Evan Morelli," Judge Caprio said, voice clear, yet gentle, "I'm going to dismiss your fine." A collective gasp erupted across the courtroom. Evan's head jerked up, stunned. His lips parted in shock. But Caprio wasn't finished. "I'm dismissing it," he continued. "Not because your actions were justified, because they were not, but because I believe the consequences of this incident have already weighed heavily on you, more than any financial penalty ever could." Evan blinked hard, disbelief shaking through him. Caprio's voice deepened with sincerity. "You have shown honesty in this courtroom today. You have shown vulnerability. And above all, you have shown love for a father who, despite his own suffering, raised a son with a compassionate heart." Tears spilled freely down Evan's face now. "But," Caprio added, raising a finger, "my decision comes with one condition." Evan straightened, willing to accept anything. "I want you to talk to someone," Caprio said firmly. "A counselor, a therapist, a professional who can help you navigate the fear and pressure you've been carrying." Evan froze, surprised by the unexpected request. Caprio continued gently. "You cannot support your father if you collapse under the weight of your own silence, and you cannot keep living in fear of his reactions. You deserve emotional help. There is no shame in seeking it." Evan nodded slowly. "And one more thing," Caprio said. "Your father doesn't need protection from the truth. He needs support, and you need boundaries." Evan let out a shaky breath. I understand, Your Honor." Caprio softened. "You do not have to betray him. You don't have to expose him. But you must protect yourself, and you must not face this alone." A moment of deep stillness followed. Even the prosecutor looked quietly moved. Judge Caprio leaned forward again, his face open, warm. "You know, Evan, sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is admit they're hurting. Your father may not understand that right now, but one day, he might." Evan's voice cracked. "I hope so, Your Honor." Caprio nodded. "So do I." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "There's an old saying," he continued, "that a family is only as strong as its willingness to face its wounds together. You cannot heal for your father, but you can heal yourself. And sometimes, that's where healing begins for everyone." The room felt full of emotion, full of reflection, full of humanity. Caprio gave Evan one last kind smile. "You are a good son," he said softly. "A very good son. Do not let fear convince you otherwise." Evan covered his face with one shaky hand, overwhelmed. His lawyer placed an arm around his shoulders. Even the spectators, strangers to him, seemed to silently offer their support. Judge Caprio lifted the gavel, not sternly, not formally, but with a tenderness that seemed to say, "This is justice. This is compassion. This is humanity in motion." He brought it down gently. Case dismissed. The sound echoed deep, powerful, almost cinematic. Evan breathed out a sob of relief. As Evan gathered his things, something unexpected happened. "Mr. Morelli," Caprio called softly. Evan turned. Caprio's eyes held a warmth, usually reserved for close family. "If you ever need guidance," he said quietly, "you're welcome in this courtroom any time." not as a defendant, as someone who deserves support. Evans swallowed hard. Thank you, Your Honor. Caprio nodded once. The young man walked toward the exit, lighter than he had entered, though still carrying the complicated ache of love and family. But he wasn't alone anymore. Not entirely. A few spectators even patted him on the back as he passed, and Judge Caprio watched him go, with the kind of expression only a man who has spent a lifetime understanding human fragility could wear. Narration flowed like the quiet closing scene of a film. Sometimes, the greatest battles people fight are the ones no one else can see. A police detective carries trauma. A son carries fear. A family carries silence. But healing begins in the moment someone speaks the truth, no matter how trembling, how fragile, how painful. Judge Caprio once said, "Compassion is not weakness, it is wisdom wearing a human heartbeat." And on this day, that heartbeat echoed through the entire courtroom. Because justice is not just the letter of the law, it is the courage to see the person behind the mistake, to listen before judging, to understand before condemning, to help before harming. And sometimes, it is a young man trembling in a courtroom, telling the truth he has feared his whole life, and a judge choosing humanity.